He's a man, we're men, we're on a podcast for everyone. It's just me, Julian, talking with Jordan and having some fun. Yeah, new podcast intro, coming in hot, fully committing. I'm fully committing. Welcome to Aboutcast. It's Julian. Jordan, how are you?
Dude, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling fully committed after that one. Excellent work, sir.
Yeah, really riled the pipes for that one. I hope you I hope you guys are enjoying the new intro theme music, special edition for today. But Jordan and I are super stoked, as you can tell, for today's topic, bringing the knowledge to the table and feasting.
Yeah. I think that's literally probably like the greatest subtitle of this podcast ever, bringing the knowledge and feasting. Because today we are talking about, something that probably you've talked about with your friends, just messing around, the dream dinner guest. So if you had a dinner and you can invite 3 people living throughout whatever time period, who would you invite? And we are about to talk about ours and why they are the best.
And I think this is an all-time great conversation piece because you're going to learn about whoever you're talking to. You're going to learn about their interests or why they're interested in certain people. It's a great icebreaker. And I think Jordan and I are going to have some wicked answers for you today on the podcast.
Absolutely. And we're going to take a quick break and then head right into it. And my first dinner guest is, no, I'm not going that quick, boys. But so the thing that I think is so interesting about this, before I start saying my guests, is you learn about what people are interested in when you hear their guests and why they're choosing them. So then you're going to learn a lot about us, and we want to learn a lot about you. So please, before we start saying these picks, go and message us and let us hear your picks as well. Because it would just be, it's just fascinating and curious, you know.
And I think it's something to get super groovy on. I think you can be as elaborate as you want. I mean, it's your dinner guest, your party. They're either entertaining you, giving you knowledge, they're funny, or they're just someone you want to look at, I guess. But ultimately, we're going to break down our dinner guests, starting with Jordan's first pick.
So my first pick is somebody that you guys might not have heard about at all, which makes sense unless you're from Japan. And it is a guy called Miyamoto Musashi. And the reason why I'm choosing this dude is because he's literally like a legend over in Japan. He grew up in kind of like around the feudalist time. So it was all about samurai, swordsmanship, ronin, and also on the verge of around like the guns time, which is interesting. And basically this dude, if you don't know, is one of the most rowdy, and not rowdy, but wild dudes ever. He has a book. It's called Miyamoto Musashi, and he also wrote The 7 Rings. And dude, this guy is just a legend. One of the most feared swordsmen. And guess what, Julian? He rocked a wooden sword for the most of it. He was checking fools with wooden swords.
Nothing says confidence like dinking someone on the head with a wooden sword. But I have to figure out, what do you think he'd be eating at your dinner? Or what would he be providing at the table? You know, once he initially sits down, what is the first thing that goes through his mind to tell you, or you ask?
That's a good question. And I guess one of the reasons too, he's not only a kind of like a hardened warrior, but he also, and I don't want to give away too much in his, from the book because it kind of talks about a lot of this, but he also spent literally, I think 3 years locked in a room, and all he had to do was read. So he is like really, really like deep and foundational and intelligent. And so I think that there's these complexities and layers that he would give you. And I think the first thing that we could talk about is his art, believe it or not. He's an artist as well as a warrior. So it's just like a deep, deep dude. And just had done a lot of stuff in his life, farming, samurai stuff, He was also like a soldier at one point. It's just like, the dude is deep.
That's fair. I guess it'd be an interesting social barrier to break down a guy who had locked himself in a room for a while to read and figure out where what his social etiquette is like, or those conversation methods, but to pick apart what he interprets from his readings and his life comparatively to what you're thinking in your modern scenario. I also would be curious to wonder if he would show you any sword skills.
So throughout kind of like time, I mean, maybe I'm a little too grown to be someone's, to be someone's like little underling. But yeah, I think that the cool thing about him is he created his own style. And he was like known for wielding 2 swords at one time, and which was like quite rare as a samurai in the moment. So it's like, yeah, dude, if I was to, it would be looking pretty badass. And it's just such an interesting life that he had. And I think that he isn't like jaded really from it. He's like quite polite. And even though he like stays away from kind of the kind of like the luxury and the riches and stuff of that nature, he's still like a really human guy. I don't know how to describe it, but just, going through his book, you can kind of like get a feel for this man, because he's obviously the main character, and a lot of really good qualities. And obviously on top of that, like, it's like the classic folklore of Japan itself. Like, people know these characters really well. And so he's really well liked. And that's why Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary samurai with the dual wielding sword, sometimes a wooden sword, sometimes an artist, is my first dinner guest pick.
I like it. I wasn't expecting that one in the ballpark as the first pick. And it's definitely very informative to someone I should probably start looking into if I ever meet him at one of Jordan's dinner parties in one way or another.
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure look into him. Unfortunately, you are not on the list, so you're not going to meet him at the dinner. But
hey, if you need a butler, I'm here.
Sounds good. So Julian, without further ado, I want to hear your first pick.
And
you better stop right there. If you say you're my mom, you're done. This podcast is over.
I am going to go with the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. What a curveball.
What?
And I think it would be a very interesting conversation to have, to speak with someone who in their mind has created a society or a group or a hive mind that is positive and beneficial to the growth of society. And the reason why I choose that side is because it's important to understand the other side of issues to truly know your stance on an issue. Not saying that this is going to change my mind in the way I look at a certain group, but it's going to give me an understanding from someone else's viewpoint to why they believe in the ways they believe, and give me, a more sense of belief in what I believe in, or I guess some just general knowledge of what came about to bring on that viewpoint. And it may be an awkward conversation, and I mean, sometimes that's what you got to have, but I think it would be a very fascinating couple of bites or minutes or whatever it turned out to be, where I would have at least a different or more of an understanding on a very difficult topic.
I definitely understand kind of the approach, and I'm a really big fan of it. The approach of you have to communicate with people that disagree with you to, first off, to figure out common ground, and then, depending on your goals, to then shift their perspective if you can. It literally sounds like the premise of like the classic Dave Chappelle skit, like the blind black racist dude.
Yeah. And it's I just think it's just something out of my comfort zone. I mean, there's a lot of picks for people at dinner guests, and I think this one would just be the most, I don't know if illuminating is the right term, but it would just be something I'm not familiar with in regards to that side of the story. Like, do I necessarily care? Not entirely, but I think to be educated on a topic, like he said, it is nice to know both sides of the story. And I think that would open a lot of other avenues in that similar realm of discussion, in branches to kind of glean information from. But I mean, that would be my dinner guest as one of my picks. Jordan, who's your second pick?
So my second pick is somebody who is really well known, but like, almost household sometimes his quotes are, but he himself is not as well known as some of his quotes, and extremely, extremely smart philosopher in Frederick Nietzsche. And the reason why, yeah, I mean, you've heard me talk about Frederick Nietzsche before if you've been on this podcast. And I'm literally rock hard as I'm speaking at this moment about him. I just love his philosophy when it comes to, what life's about and why we're doing this and how we are supposed to be doing it correctly, as far as, like struggle is the way. And he's extremely smart, estimated IQ of over 165. And I think that he would be somebody so illuminating to talk to, just because he, like, the more I learn about him, the more gnarly he gets. Like, literally, Julian, the last thing I heard or learned about him was he used to like think that struggle was the only way, so much that he wished hardship on people, on like, hardship, life full of hardship on the people's lives of his loved ones. That is next level.
Yeah, that's fascinating, to say the least.
Yeah, no, truly. And I think that, sometimes it's easy to misconstrue him. And I think that another reason why I'd want him as a guest is because, a lot of people can think that he has kind of like Nazi underlyings. But that's definitively his sister who did it. So basically when he got sick and died, his sister took over like basically all his writings and then tweaked it so it sounded a lot more Nazi-like. And so it'd be really cool to truly hear kind of like from him, straight from the horse's mouth. And being that he's so smart, I'd be worried that I wouldn't understand some of it, but I'm really going to give it a go.
Do you think, how is an IQ, like if I wanted to have my IQ tested, sorry, this is an odd question, where do you think you'd get that tested at? Because obviously when you hear about educated or intelligent humans, their IQ score is always referenced. But like, I personally don't know my own IQ score, and I'm sure a good handful of people don't as well. So I'm always curious to where that number is pulled from. And do you think if you took an IQ test in terms of where you'd rate on that scale, do you think you'd be closer or further away from Nietzsche?
So where you can take IQ tests, and obviously Frederick Nietzsche, I don't believe, took an IQ test. What they did is kind of like took his body of work, took people, analyzed it, learned from exactly what he was saying, and and then compared them to people that we know have tests done. And so, for instance, I think William Shakespeare is around 165 plus 2. And so it's a conglomerate. And I think there's a standard IQ test, but then there's obviously IQ tests that aren't necessarily standard, kind of like the Wonderlic, if you guys know about that. That's the like classic one that they use for like NFL draftees. And I think that if personally for me, I would definitely be, well, I would imagine I'm the first confidence intervals of kind of like the median. So that would mean I'm probably, I don't know, somewhere like not too far off from like 100 or so, which is about average. And you got to think too, like men have wider tails than women when it comes to IQ. So basically, if you're not on the median and you're outside the confidence interval, then you might even be a little bit, chances are if you're a really above average smart dude, you're a really, really smart dude. But obviously a lot of people are like extremely average and some below average. But yeah, I would probably be, I mean, if I'm talking like 100, I would be closer to the average than obviously closer to Nietzsche, of course. And you got to think like, here's a relative scale. I think that people like, I think like Jordan B. Peterson, who's a really smart guy. If you've ever read Maps of Meaning, literally I read that and I'm like, or any of his books. He's really, really intelligent, sometimes hard to read. So some of that's his fault, but he's about 135, I think, around there, maybe 140. So it's like, these are some smart dudes and you'd have to bring your game no matter. You'd have to bring your game for sure to kind of like hang with them.
That's I assume that's a fair assumption there. And it's always interesting to see how intelligence scales over time in terms of, someone who was deemed intelligent during a certain time period versus someone who was average in a later time period or vice versa. But I think, when we talk in terms of intelligence, there's a large scale of what someone can be intelligent with regards to or educated on. And I think that's why my second guest maybe have the highest comedy IQ of all time. And that's Dave Chappelle, which is funny that you mentioned him earlier, but I think Dave Chappelle's comedy education or intelligence is phenomenally off the charts, where it'd be very interesting to just sit down and talk with him in regards to just his perspective and his philosophies on life and how that ties into his personal comedy or his career decision.
So my question is to you, and I think that's an excellent pick. I'm a really big fan of Dave Chappelle. But my question is to you is, do you believe that it's IQ, why he's a good comedian, or do you think it's skill? If you obviously it's going to be both. But if you could just if you said what's more of the driver?
I think it's IQ. And I think in regards to the way I look at it is, obviously you and I both played basketball. And I think some people can have amazing skill and poor basketball IQ and be all right. But I think those who have an amazing natural instinct and intelligence for the game can always develop their skill. And I think that's how comedy works over time, is most of those comedians who are inherently funny and kind of destined for stardom, obviously when they start, they're still slightly funny, but they work on that craft over and over and over again. When you look at Chappelle, who was doing stand-up at like 13 or 14 in front of thugs and getting paid, and then understanding, okay, this did okay. How do I evolve this into a better story? And how do I evolve this punchline? And how do I work backwards? And how do I tie this in with current affairs? And how do I work in current events or little snippets here and there to create a cohesive hour and a half, 2 hours, 6 hours on stage that is going to make people laugh? And I think that comes from the intelligence part, where you are understanding how things are weaving in and out, the balance between simply telling the story and providing the comedic relief is something that is highly underrated. Because if anyone, who watches comedy sees a superstar comedian and then you compare it to some guy who's just famous and put up a stand-up, you can see the immense difference in their comedic levels.
Gotcha. No, I think you're right, especially with that analogy with, basketball IQ and how, it's quite different than skill, and you might be really good at one and not good at the other. And that's definitely a possibility.
And so we're at the end of our table. We have two guests there sitting across from one another. There's 3 of us in total, and we need the third guest, the fourth person at the party, to balance our table. Who's your third guest?
So this one's like really, really, really tough. Just because I was like tossing and turning between 2 people. One, I think would be amazing. Well, I think both would be amazing to learn from. But I think one would be more particular, I guess. And I think that this might be skirting the rules a little bit. But I'll give you both. If one doesn't fit, then I'll use the other. But basically, my third and final guest would be me at the end of my life.
Damn you, Jordan. Damn you.
Was that going to be your pick?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Dude. We're on the same wavelength. That's awesome. Yeah, I think here, how about that then? You can have that one, and I'll bring in my ringer as Aristotle.
Whoa, what an interesting turn of events, but I'm cool with either one. I mean, I think we'll have different answers for why we're interviewing ourselves at the end of our times.
Yeah, while we're dining with ourselves.
So yeah, give me the breakdown of either one.
Okay, so quick for Aristotle, because obviously he doesn't need, a lot. So first off, this homie's teacher was Plato. So super deep. Plato's teacher was Socrates. So yeah. And Aristotle is like really, really well versed and extremely like ridiculously knowledgeable on things. He created the variable in math. And he also was obviously the mentor of Alexander the Great, which, some people say is, like how well can you teach his 13-year-old kid? Who cares? But he's a bona fide like thinker and like just honestly, just an extraordinary mind. And then to get deeper into why I would choose myself at the end of my life is because I think it would be the most perspective changing thing that I could have ever experienced. Just in the fact of, having these smart people, having these people with perspective is basically all me and Julian has picked. People with different perspectives than us. And I think that, the oldest living existence of me, if you think of time as like, as not like a linear thing. I think that he would have a different perspective and be a different person. But at the same time, I know that I would take it as like a personal thing. So, if the older me told the younger me, hey man, it's really important that you always get enough water to drink during the day, I would think like, oh fuck, that means something super important for some reason. And even though like knowing me, I might say it because, oh yeah, it's a good thing to do. And it really doesn't have anything to do with anything, like, as far as the lesson goes. But I think that I would be way more actionable on that conversation than anybody else at the table, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, depends on what you believe in the terms of time theories, because it could be interesting if you're on one side of this time thing where you believe if you do make action on certain actionable items, does that change the person that you talk to at the end of the day? Because if, he says, don't take this job and you end up not taking it, does that change your timeline? That's a whole nother nutshell. But I think I agree with you. The perspective from yourself to understand how to relate, I guess, to yourself from another point of view is one of the strongest things I think that could happen in any regards, because they know how you're essentially talking to yourself and you know how to get through or push those buttons to make a change in yourself.
Yeah. And that's something I find extremely like powerful. And to this day, like, more, I guess, so one of the people that I find is the most valuable in my life is my brother. And one of the big reasons, obviously we grew up together and I kind of like him. But I think one of the biggest reasons is because I think he's the person in the world that most understands me. And I mean, short of myself, that's, that would be extremely important. And so can you imagine, like, you with more experience talking to you about things, like that would be the person who understood you better than you understand you to a point, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. That was my thought process as well. So I definitely agree on that aspect. And I guess if we're going to surmise my third dinner guest alternating from myself in the future, I think I would pivot to I don't know how to put this, the last person of your lineage in the future. So say little Julian has a child and little Julian's child has a child, et cetera, et cetera. I would love to see what the last person of that lineage, or speak with the last person of that lineage. So I don't know what that person at the dinner table's name would be, or I don't know if the term what it would be is correct, but to see that evolution from 2019 me today to the last person in that family tree, family line, you can see that direct relation to what it would be like and what stories they would tell in their lifetime or what was going on while they were alive in that society.
Interesting. I think that would be an interesting thing, but in the way of like, you're talking to somebody from like, far in the future, hopefully. But I think that the most curious thing, and could be something as simple as like a picture, but like see what they look like in a way.
Yeah. And yeah, that's one of the biggest curiosities I have, because as we know, like people with blue eyes or green eyes, just colored eyes in general, is becoming more rare. Brown eyes is becoming popular. Brunette hair is becoming popular. More and more people are having multiple ethnicities mixed in together. Maybe by that time, there's extraterrestrial beings in the mix, if you believe in that, or something has changed, or genetic modifications. All this sci-fi thriller, whatever you want to believe could happen. No one knows, right? Just to see that person and what they look like. And maybe societal norms are completely flipped on their head. Maybe things have not gone forward, but gone backwards, where they're in horses and buggies, or dinosaurs have come back. You never know, right? This is completely sci-fi stuff, but there's someone down the line that's going to be in that lineage that's going to be part of your family. And to see what that's like would just be a completely different experience from my other guests.
Dude, and on top of that, like to have Dave Chappelle rip on the last of your lineage would be actually pretty fucking awesome.
It'd be a dinner to remember, that's for sure. But with that being said, Jordan, overall of your dinner guest, who do you think the first one to leave is?
I would say definitely Miyamoto Musashi. And the reason why is because he's pretty, he's more of he's really kind. He's really cordial. Actually, it depends if I get him drunk. Maybe if he needs a place to stay. But I would think that, naturally he would leave the soonest fair. Just because he's going to go out.
I definitely could see that.
Fucking be a samurai.
Yeah. I think that's a short-lived guest.
How about you? I think the racist guy might leave quick.
This, that, and the third. We've given you our 3 dinner guests. We hope to hear your 3 dinner guests, whether that's an Anchor voice message, whether that's on social media found in the show notes below, whether that's an email, whatever it may be. We hope you found it interesting to see who we picked. And I'm sure we could go over this forever. Comedians, athletes, actors, writers, artists, poets, chefs, everything, the whole nine. But we thank you guys for listening. We appreciate your time. Jordan, send them off with a nice little sweet something.
You know what, guys? I really appreciate you for tuning into this podcast and coming this far, enjoying it. And, hopefully you reflect on it as well. And, I think that one thing that I appreciate about you guys is that, you decided today to be smarter than you were, or learn more than you did yesterday. And so thank you for that. And I hope to see you again.